Okay, well, as to whether a virus is alive or not, let's start first by giving you this reference right out of your textbook, that your e-flex book, that kind of goes through step by step the characteristics of life and why a virus is not alive. There are a few of you that answered a virus was alive, which was interesting, but then you didn't defend it with any characteristics of life that we've discussed in class.
Okay, one of the things we discussed in class last week was this idea of a virus and what it was. And we discussed that a virus is not a cell. It's not like a bacteria or your cells. And we'll talk.
So when we talk about bacteria, we're talking about some type of either cone or rod that has a membrane. There's all kinds of structures that are inside the bacteria. There's a circular DNA in there as well. And what's key is that this bacteria is doing chemical reactions. They have enzymes like ribosomes and other enzymes. They're constantly doing chemical reactions. They're processing energy. They're making ATP by eating, or they're releasing enzymes to defend themselves or break down food. They're absorb things are coming in, and so life is kind of an active, almost like a circus, a three-ring circus where things are moving, things are coming in, things are leaving. Life is something that's happening. All right, it's like a big party, constantly moving in and out in every direction and changing and producing proteins and etc. A virus doesn't do any of that. It's a virus. A virus sits and waits for something to pick it up. And once something picks it up, it can actually react to that thing. I wanted to say it can react to its environment, but it does not. That thing, that cell, it'll be a cell that'll pick it up, will absorb it, open it up, and take its genetic material and produce more of this thing we call a virus. So when you're talking about a virus, it can be really pretty complicated. I mean, look at it; it's kind of crazy. This is a nuclear protein. It's a you have these things called histones. It's very similar. It doesn't have DNA, but it has this little piece of RNA that acts as its genetic material. It has this kind of matrix that acts as a protector for its insides. And this is Ebola. This is the virus Ebola. I just thought it was in the news recently, so I thought you might want to take a look at the details of what it looks like. These things that are on the outside, in this case, they're glycoproteins, or sugars and protein combinations. And you're going to learn what a protein is next week and what a sugar is next week. This is what the cell reads. This is the message that reacts with the cell. And this particular virus is very virulent. So there are a lot of cells that have the matching lock to this key. That then these cells take it up and they reproduce a lot, and the cell dies, and you get a lot of internal bleeding, and you die. This is Ebola. Now, you didn't need to know the details of this. What you need to understand is that a cell is here. This is a cell. It's alive. It's active. It's producing. It's processing energy, whether it's eating or it's making sugar or whatever it's doing. The cell is doing all kinds of things all the time. The virus is not. The virus is picked up by something, taken in, has genetic material, the cell then makes copies of it, and that procedure, making copies of this thing, ends up killing the cell. Once you make billions of these, billions of cells die, and the host dies usually. Some viruses, the host doesn't die, like a cold. Usually people don't die from a cold, but the cells still die, and cells are attacked, and there's a reaction. So in any case, the point is that this was a really good opportunity for me as a science teacher, and for the people that are going to make your final exam from the state of Ohio and the ACT people. This is a really great opportunity to test whether you understand what it means to be alive. Because here's this thing that has some characteristics of life. It has this little bit of genetic material that does evolve, yes. That can be passed from generation to generation, yes. It has all these kind of characteristics, almost alive. People use the words the virus is attacking all the time. So they have all these opportunities. This is a really big opportunity for you to look at the characteristics of life and apply them. Do you understand what the characteristics of life are? Can you identify something is alive or not? And can you defend that in a written form? If you saw the video I sent you previously on the multiple choice, you saw the characteristics of life. You saw one is that life has a cell, or made of cells. This is not a cell. It's sure is pretty, at least in picture. It has more than one structure, but it's not a cell. And you'll learn what a cell is in a couple weeks. A bacteria is a cell, so a bacterial infection is different from a viral infection. So when a doctor gives you an antibiotic, they're trying to kill the bacteria. When the doctor is giving you, if you have a virus, the antibiotic won't help you. So the antibiotic is just for the bacteria or other cellular organisms, other cells, because the antibiotic kills cells. A virus is not killed that way. So there's an essential difference here, and that was my point, just bringing these things up earlier in the week. And the key was that you be able to explain why this virus is not alive. So it's not made of a cell, so no on the cell. That's the first characteristic of life. Then you talk about things like, does it process energy? No, it doesn't. Does it reproduce? Well, it doesn't reproduce. A cell will reproduce it. So the answer is still no, although some people might say yes. So give it a half a check if you want. Does it have order? Well, it certainly has order, but is it really complicated? Is it really even something that's as close to this here, to this cell? And the answer, in my opinion, or most people's opinion, is no. Now you might ask, well, what's the difference? What's the difference between looking at, I might ask you, is a carburetor a car? Is a muffler a car? Is a windshield a car? A carburetor is pretty complicated. It has a lot of moving parts. It certainly is important to the car, but it's not a car. A car is a lot more complicated. It has to do a lot, numerous other functions that the carburetor can't. Well, it's the same with the virus. Is this complicated? Sure, it's a little complicated, but it's nothing like a cell. A cell has to do a lot of other things that it doesn't, and certainly could not do. It does not maintain homeostasis. It's protected. Once it's built, it's like a fortress, and it goes to sleep. I mean, it's not asleep because it's not awake, because it's not alive. So it's just a piece of genetic material surrounded by some relatively complex structure that sits and waits for some cell to pick it up and make more copies of it. Where a cell, like a bacteria, maintains homeostasis. It pumps water out, it brings food in. Food's getting low, it brings food in. Water's getting too much inside, so it pumps it out. It needs oxygen, so it lets it in, and it puts out carbon dioxide. So this is happening all the time. That is not happening here in the virus. So again, it's not keeping up. It's not keeping homeostasis. If you add something to the water, if you add more water here, a lot of H2O and very little salt, this cell will react in order to. It will allow water to come in order to keep the balance or equilibrium across the membrane. This virus won't. It doesn't let anything in. Nothing goes in or out. It doesn't matter to it what's out here. If something breaks this coat and destroys it, it's just you can't make more copies. It's not really dead because it was never alive. So that's a key point. And so you go down the list of all the characteristics of life, and you see a virus does not qualify as those. And that's the same as the multiple choice question that I gave you about the Mars lander discovering this thing that has some qualities. There's some order to it. That's why I said there was order to that particular one, because it was similar to the question that I gave you the answer to, by the way, in class about the virus. The virus does have a little order, but it does not react to its environment. All right. Well, I hope this helped, and I want to see you after school if you scored really low on the quiz. Think about the characteristics of life and ask yourself, if Mr. Mendoza, and let me tell you right now I will, ask me for another example of an application. Can I apply the characteristics of life? Can I identify if something's alive or not using the characteristics of life to defend my position? Okay? You have to defend your position on a quiz, just like you had to do here on this essay. All right. Most of you did well on it, but make sure you can do it again, and under any circumstances, given any example. All right, not just virus, although virus is a viable one for the end of year exam. All right, have a great one. Bye bye.